You don't change your life by doing one big thing once. You change it by doing a few small things consistently. And one day, boom, you don't even recognize yourself. Not because you're worse off, but because you've leveled up so much. Your old self couldn't dream of the person you've become. Discipline is the bridge between goals and greatness. This is not just a catchy phrase. It's a fundamental truth that separates those who dream from those who do. The world is full of people with incredible dreams, lofty ambitions, and noble intentions, but very few ever taste the reality of those visions. Why? Because while goals are easy to set and inspiring to imagine, it is discipline that demands your daily attention, your moment-to-moment decisions, and your personal sacrifices. Discipline is the daily grind, the quiet commitment, the consistent behavior that bridges the gap between where you are and where you want to be. You can write down your goals, visualize them, speak them out loud every morning. But if discipline doesn't show up in your calendar, in your schedule, in your small habits, your goals will remain nothing more than wishful thinking. Discipline doesn't care about how you feel today. It doesn't ask for your mood, your energy level, or your emotional weather report. It simply shows up and says, do the thing. And when you obey that quiet demand over and over again, you start to feel something shift inside you. You become a person who finishes what they start. You become someone who can be counted on by others and by yourself. Without discipline, goals become exhausting because they constantly remind you of what you should be doing but haven't done. Discipline frees you from that burden by turning those shoulds into action. And it's not about being harsh with yourself. It's about being honest, because you know the life you want to live. And discipline is how you build the road that leads to it. Consider the story of a young man named Marcus. He had dreams of becoming a best-selling author. He read every book about writing, watched interviews with famous authors, took writing courses online, and even bought a beautiful leather-bound notebook and a high-end pen to get started. But for months, nothing happened. He wrote a paragraph here, a page there, but nothing consistent. Then one day, he had a conversation with a mentor who told him, Marcus, success doesn't come from inspiration. It comes from structure. You need to write every day, whether the words feel beautiful or not. Set a time. Stick to it. Don't wait for the muse. Discipline is your muse. That conversation changed him. He decided to wake up an hour earlier every day and write 500 words, no matter how he felt. Some days it was easy, some days it was brutal, but he did it, day after day, week after week. After a year, he had written over 180,000 words. 2 years later, his book was published, and it went on to become a national bestseller, not because he was more talented than anyone else, but because he was more disciplined. That's the truth most people ignore. Talent is overrated. Motivation is fleeting. But discipline? It's the lever that moves mountains. It is the invisible hand that shapes your future, one repeated action at a time. When people see someone at the top of their game, a world-class athlete, a successful entrepreneur, a respected leader, they often admire the result without understanding the relentless, repetitive, boring work that went into building that result. Behind every moment of greatness is 1,000 moments of practice, and that practice is fueled by discipline. It's not glamorous. It doesn't post well on social media, but it works. Discipline also demands that you say no, not just to distractions, but to lesser versions of yourself. To comfort, to laziness, to procrastination. Every time you hit the snooze button, every time you say, just one more episode, every time you push that hard conversation or important task to tomorrow, you're voting against your own greatness. Discipline is the quiet voice that says, no, not this time. You made a promise to yourself. And when you listen to that voice often enough, it gets louder. It starts to become your default setting. You start to see that your greatest strength isn't willpower, it's consistency. Because discipline turns effort into results. It transforms intentions into outcomes. It takes vague desires and sculpts them into tangible achievements. And it doesn't have to be dramatic. In fact, discipline thrives in simplicity. drinking water instead of soda, reading for 20 minutes instead of scrolling endlessly, writing down your top 3 tasks instead of trying to remember them, turning off notifications for 2 hours and focusing deeply. These aren't groundbreaking actions, but they're powerful because they're repeatable, and once you learn how to win the small battles, you start gaining momentum for the larger wars. Every disciplined act strengthens your confidence. It tells your subconscious mind, we can do hard things, we can follow through. And that belief begins to change everything. A few simple habits done daily rewrite your identity, not overnight, but inevitably. Because who you are isn't some fixed label stamped on your birth certificate. It's not locked in place by genetics, environment, or even past choices. Identity is a living process, shaped moment by moment, action by action, and nothing reshapes that process faster than habit, especially the small, quiet ones. The truth is, every time you do something, you reinforce a belief about who you are. When you read a book instead of watching TV, you're not just consuming knowledge, you're voting for the belief that you are a learner. When you lace up your shoes and go for that walk even when it's raining, you're reinforcing the belief that you are disciplined, resilient, and health-focused. It may not seem like a big deal in the moment, but repetition is a force multiplier. What you do repeatedly carves grooves into your identity, and over time, those grooves become roads you travel automatically. That's how the man who once said, "I'm just not a morning person," becomes the one who now rises at 5 a.m. to meditate, stretch, and plan his day before the rest of the world stirs. Take the story of Sarah, a 36-year-old marketing consultant who struggled for years with self-doubt and inconsistency. She had ideas, big ones. She wanted to start a blog, launch an online course, and eventually coach others. But every time she made a plan, she abandoned it within weeks. Why? Because her self-image told her she was someone who never finishes anything. And as long as she believed that, her actions aligned with it. Then something shifted. She didn't try to change everything at once. She didn't throw herself into a 90-day sprint or some dramatic reinvention. Instead, she chose one tiny habit. Every morning, before checking email or social media, she would write for 15 minutes. Just 15. No expectations, no word count goal, just the commitment to show up. At first, it felt too small to matter, but something fascinating happened. After a few weeks, she noticed she felt different. Not in a loud external way, but internally her self-talk began to shift. She caught herself saying things like, "I'm someone who writes," or "I'm a content creator." The habit came first. The identity followed. After a few months, she expanded her writing time, started publishing her work, and eventually launched the course she'd been dreaming about for years, all because of one small daily habit that redefined how she saw herself. This principle applies across every area of life. You see it in people who start by walking around the block each day and eventually become runners. At first, they're not trying to be athletes. They're just someone who walks. But the act of lacing up shoes, moving their body, and choosing effort over ease triggers a shift in how they view themselves. They start choosing water over soda, parking farther from the store, spending less time on the couch, not because a trainer told them to, but because they are now someone who values their body. Identity is sticky. Once you start behaving in a way that reflects the person you want to become, it gets harder to go back to who you were, because there's a conflict. You can't keep saying, "I'm lazy," when your actions every day prove otherwise. Over time, your subconscious mind starts catching up. It starts believing the evidence. And here's what most people miss. Habits don't need to be heroic to be transformational. We think change requires dramatic breakthroughs, new jobs, new cities, new relationships, but often the most profound transformations come from the smallest shifts. Reading 1 page a day, flossing 1 tooth, writing 1 sentence, making your bed, calling a loved one. These micro behaviors might seem trivial, but they create momentum. More importantly, they restore trust in yourself. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, no matter how small, you build internal credibility. That's where self-confidence truly comes from. Not from hype, not from affirmations, but from alignment between what you say and what you do. The more aligned those two things are, the stronger your identity becomes. And once you begin to believe something about yourself, you naturally start acting in accordance with it. That's how a reader becomes an author, how a jogger becomes a marathoner, how someone who just wants to eat a little healthier becomes a full-blown nutrition coach. It's also why change feels so hard in the beginning, because you're acting against your current identity. You're doing things that feel inconsistent with who you think you are. That's where most people quit, not because the habit is too hard, but because the internal dissonance is too loud. You meditate once and your brain screams, "This isn't you. You've never done this before. What's the point?" But if you stay with it, if you keep showing up, eventually the habit wins. It drowns out the old voice. It builds a new track in your brain that says, "Actually, this is me now." That's when change becomes self-sustaining. You're no longer forcing yourself to act differently. You're simply expressing who you now believe you are. This is why habit formation is ultimately identity formation. When you commit to small, repeatable actions, you're not just building better routines, you're building a new internal narrative. You're slowly removing the layers of doubt, procrastination, and inconsistency and replacing them with clarity, purpose, and belief. You don't just do habits, you become them. And as those habits take root, they reshape the architecture of your self-concept. Every journal entry becomes a stone in the foundation of a thoughtful life. Every healthy meal becomes evidence that you care about yourself. Every act of kindness becomes a thread in the fabric of your character. Your results are trailing indicators of your routines. They don't show up the moment you make a change, and they certainly don't arrive just because you made a decision. Results are always late to the party. They lag behind your effort like a shadow, like an echo that takes its time reaching you. And this is where so many people lose the game. They assume that because they didn't see instant results from their new behavior, the behavior must not work. They go to the gym for 2 weeks, and the scale doesn't budge, so they quit. They write for a month and get no readers, so they give up. They wake up early, meditate, journal, and after 10 days still feel anxious or distracted, so they think, what's the point? But the point is this: every result you experience today is the sum of the routines you've been practicing over the past 30, 60, 90 days or more. Just as your current physical shape is a reflection of how you've treated your body consistently over time, your current bank account, your current mood, your current skill level, these are all trailing indicators. They're feedback loops from the systems you've been operating. Take the example of Andrew, a 42-year-old man who decided to get his health in order. He was overweight, stressed out, low on energy, and embarrassed about his condition. So he made a promise to himself: walk every day for 20 minutes, eat 1 clean meal a day, drink 3 liters of water, and sleep by 10:30 p.m. He didn't try to do everything at once, just a few foundational changes. After the first week, nothing changed. In fact, he felt more tired than usual. His muscles ached from the walking. He craved sugar more than ever, and the scale stubbornly stuck to the same number. But he kept going. By week 3, there were small improvements. His sleep was a bit deeper, his digestion slightly better, and his mood more stable. But the scale still didn't move. Then, around week 6, something clicked. Not only did his body start to change visibly, but his energy exploded. He was down 10 pounds, sleeping like a baby, and getting more done in less time at work. His friends noticed. His clothes fit differently, but those results, they didn't begin when he saw them. They began on day 1, when he started the routines. They were just delayed. The scale simply took its time catching up with the systems. It's the same in finances. You could decide today to stop spending impulsively and start saving 10% of your income. That one action won't change your life in 24 hours. But if you do it every month, consistently, and pair it with learning to invest wisely, 6 months from now, your financial position looks very different. A year from now, the version of you who used to live paycheck to paycheck is replaced by someone with savings, investments, peace of mind, and options. Those results weren't magic. They were trailing indicators of repeated decisions to honor a smarter routine. Your net worth doesn't explode from one bonus bonus check. It builds slowly from habitual choices. And the frustrating part is, for a long while, you feel like nothing is happening. But behind the scenes, compound interest, mental clarity, and habit reinforcement are all doing their quiet work. You just have to wait long enough to let the results catch up. The same principle applies to your skill development. You want to become a great speaker, writer, coder, leader, anything that requires competence and mastery? Your first efforts won't yield applause. In fact, they'll probably be met with silence, confusion, or even criticism, because your performance always lags behind your preparation. If you record one video and nobody watches it, that's not a sign to stop, it's a sign to continue. If you write 10 blog posts and get 3 views, that's not failure. It's a normal part of the results curve. You're laying the groundwork now for the identity that will earn attention and credibility later. Every piece of content you create, every lesson you learn, every book you read, it's all building toward a tipping point you can't yet see. But make no mistake, the results are coming. They're just waiting until the routines are solid enough to sustain them. And this is why your daily systems matter more than your daily outcomes. Because you can't control the result timeline. You can't predict exactly when the breakthrough will happen or when the momentum will kick in. But you can control your routines. You can write every day. You can study every day. You can make calls, show up, move your body, nourish your mind, and protect your energy. If you do that, the results will come. Not instantly, but inevitably. It's like planting seeds in a field. You water them, protect them from the elements, give them light, but they sprout on their own schedule. You can't rush the harvest, but you can keep showing up to plant, water, and nurture. Eventually, the field blooms. Not because you hoped, but because you repeated the routine, even when the soil looked empty. The magic is in the mundane. That's the great secret no one tells you at the beginning of the journey. We grow up looking for sparks, for fireworks, for breakthroughs that come crashing through the sky like lightning. We think success must be tied to some extraordinary event, some sudden moment of clarity, a rare stroke of genius, a golden opportunity handed to us in dramatic fashion. But the truth, the kind of truth that only experience teaches you, is far less glamorous and far more powerful. Greatness is stitched together from thousands of small, ordinary actions done well and done consistently. The magic isn't found in the once-in-a-lifetime chance. It's in the 5 a.m. alarm clock that no one else sees. It's in the plain notebooks filled with ideas no one will ever read. It's in the daily routines, the repetitions, the boring things you do when nobody's watching and no applause is coming. The remarkable is buried deep inside the unremarkable. And the people who rise to the top aren't the ones who chase constant excitement. They're the ones who fall in love with the mundane. Consider the example of Daniel, a young man who dreamed of becoming a world-class pianist. He was captivated by the greats, Chopin, Rachmaninoff, Horowitz. He'd watch performance after performance on YouTube, transfixed by the speed, the elegance, the emotion of it all. When he finally sat down at his own keyboard, he expected that same passion to carry him through hours of practice. But what he discovered instead was repetition. Hours of playing the same scales, working through finger exercises, practicing one bar of a sonata until his hands cramped. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't thrilling, it was, quite honestly, boring. But something in him decided to stick with it. Every day, without fail, he played. Not because it was always fun, but because he began to understand that this was the process. Years passed. One day, a teacher heard him perform at a small recital and invited him to audition for a conservatory. Another year later, he was performing for audiences, winning competitions. But those big moments didn't define him. What defined him were the thousands of hours spent alone in a room, pressing down on ivory keys, slowly improving. The magic came, but only because he first mastered the mundane. This truth applies everywhere. You want to get fit? It's not the result of some magical new workout or a superfood smoothie. It's showing up to the gym even when you're tired. It's eating clean even when no one else is watching. It's tracking your sleep, drinking your water, stretching at night. None of these actions on their own will get you a six-pack or turn you into an athlete overnight. But together, repeated day in and day out, they move mountains. They reshape your body, and even more importantly, your identity. You stop being someone who wants to be healthy and become someone who is healthy. And it's all built on the bricks of daily discipline. There's no glamour in it, no spotlight, but it works. In fact, it's the only thing that ever works. Think about relationships. You don't build a great marriage or lifelong friendship with one grand gesture or a perfectly timed vacation. You build it with everyday choices, checking in, listening, laughing, sharing meals, remembering small things that matter. It's in folding laundry together, in conversations during long drives, in moments of silence where you're simply present. Mundane? Yes. But those ordinary moments are where trust lives, where connection deepens, where love is built. Relationships that endure are rooted not in excitement, but in reliability. You become irreplaceable in someone's life, not because you were always the most thrilling, but because you were there, consistently, kindly, without needing fanfare. In business too, the magic lives in the mundane. You want to build a successful company? It's not about viral launches or sudden investor interest. It's about cold emails, customer service calls, fixing broken systems, creating better processes. It's waking up early to solve problems before anyone else notices them. It's doing market research, testing ideas, documenting failures, learning fast, and staying humble. Entrepreneurs who make it big often tell stories of a moment when everything clicked, but the real story is the years they spent doing the same boring things with dedication. They showed up, they followed up, they tried again. And slowly, those little tasks formed a foundation so strong that when opportunity finally did knock, they were already ready. Even in the creative arts, writing, painting, music, the same rule applies. The artist doesn't find inspiration by waiting for a muse. The writer doesn't create brilliance by staring at a blank screen waiting for the perfect line. The best creators build a habit. They sit down, they work, they make something good or bad every single day. Stephen King writes 2,000 words a day, even on holidays. Picasso painted or drew something nearly every day of his life. It's not about the flash of genius. It's about doing the work, over and over, without exception. That's what sharpens your edge. That's what allows you to capture brilliance when it finally shows up, because you've prepared yourself in the most mundane ways imaginable. Don't major in minor things. Clarity creates momentum. This principle isn't just a motivational line, it's a philosophy that separates the busy from the effective, the overwhelmed from the fulfilled. Every day, most people drown in activity. They wake up, respond to emails, check notifications, go to meetings, juggle errands, attend to a dozen urgent tasks, and collapse at night wondering why they feel stuck. They're exhausted, not because they aren't working hard, but because they're investing their best energy in the smallest levers. They confuse motion with progress. But here's the truth. Not everything deserves your attention. Not everything moves the needle. If you spend your days obsessing over perfection in the insignificant while ignoring what truly matters, you may stay busy, but you won't move forward. You'll end the week with a full calendar and an empty sense of achievement. Clarity, knowing what actually matters, is what breaks that cycle. Clarity focuses your energy, narrows your decisions, and frees you from distraction. And once you get clear, momentum builds naturally. You stop spinning your wheels and start building real traction. Take, for instance, the story of Melissa, a small business owner who ran a boutique branding agency. When she started, she wore every hat, designing logos, answering customer service emails, posting on social media, sending invoices, tweaking her website, handling tech support, even researching hashtags. Her days were packed, her to-do list endless. She was doing everything, and yet her revenue flatlined, her stress soared, and her creativity suffered. That's when she sat down and asked herself a hard question. What actually drives my business forward? The answer was simple: finding and serving high-value clients. That meant sales and project delivery. All the other things, while not worthless, were distractions from her core focus. So she made a shift. She hired a part-time assistant, automated routine emails, scheduled social media in batches, and dedicated her mornings, her most productive time, to client outreach and project work. The The result? Within 3 months, her income tripled. Not because she worked more hours, but because she got clear on what mattered and refused to major in the minor. The clarity gave her power. It simplified her world and created momentum that had been missing for years. This applies not just in business, but in life. Think of someone trying to get healthy. They might spend weeks researching the best supplements, debating whether to try keto or paleo, watching endless fitness influencers on YouTube, comparing different brands of protein powder, and agonizing over whether to do cardio before or after lifting. All the while, they're not moving, not walking, not meal prepping, not tracking food, not getting consistent sleep. They're caught in the trap of majoring in minor things, missing the forest for the trees. What creates momentum in health is actually very simple. Move your body daily, eat mostly whole foods, sleep well, manage stress. The moment they simplify, the moment they stop chasing perfect and start focusing on consistent action in the right direction, results begin to show. Their clarity reduces mental clutter. They don't need another YouTube opinion. They need a glass of water, a good night's sleep, and a 30-minute walk. Suddenly, what felt overwhelming becomes doable. That's what clarity does. It shrinks the problem down to its essentials and turns chaos into order. Students fall into the same trap. They highlight every line in the textbook, rewrite their notes in 5 colors, organize their folders endlessly, and watch Study With Me videos online. But they're not actually learning. They're just decorating the edges. The students who win understand what the exam is actually testing. They identify the 20% of material that determines 80% of the outcome. They practice problems, quiz themselves, teach the content out loud, and focus on understanding concepts rather than polishing their notes. They seek clarity. What does success look like? What will actually be measured? What am I expected to do with this information? Once they answer that, they build real momentum because their effort is aligned with the outcome. Even in relationships, this concept holds weight. People get caught up in minor offenses, subtle slights, misinterpreted tones of voice, or unmet expectations. They hold grudges over text messages, debate over who said what and how it was said. But they miss the major things: honesty, consistency, respect, effort, presence. Clarity in relationships comes when you ask, what truly matters here? It's not being right in an argument. It's maintaining connection. It's not winning a debate. It's understanding each other. When couples gain clarity on values, on communication, on what they want to build together, they move forward faster. Their energy is no longer drained by pettiness. The relationship gains traction because both people know what they're really working toward. In any field, fitness, business, relationships, education, when you get clear on what matters most and eliminate the non-essential, you unlock speed. Clarity is a performance enhancer. You think faster, decide quicker, act bolder. You're no longer stuck in indecision or perfectionism. You know where you're going and why it matters. You're not trying to do 100 things with mediocre effort. You're doing a few things with excellence. That's how momentum is built. It's not about doing more. It's about doing what counts. When you stop wasting energy on things that don't move you forward and pour that energy into things that do, you begin to experience results, not just faster, but with greater fulfillment. The feeling of progress is addictive, but it only comes when you're clear. Success isn't something you chase down like a wild animal or desperately pursue like a fleeting prize. Instead, success is something you attract by becoming an attractive person. This idea flips the common narrative on its head because most people imagine success as a finish line they have to sprint toward. They believe it's about working harder, networking more aggressively, or getting luckier breaks. But the real secret lies deeper, in who you become during the journey, not just what you do. When you develop qualities that draw opportunity, respect, and influence, success naturally comes looking for you. It's a magnetic process rather than a forced one. You don't push success away with frantic chasing. You pull it in by building character, skills, and value. Consider the story of Jason, an ambitious entrepreneur who launched his first startup at age 25. In the early days, Jason chased success with all his might. He spent endless hours cold calling potential clients, attending networking events where he tried too hard to impress, and obsessing over immediate revenue numbers. But no matter how hard he pushed, the results were inconsistent and frustrating. Then Jason had a shift in mindset. Instead of forcing opportunities, he decided to focus on becoming someone worth doing business with. He committed to learning deeply about his industry, improving his communication skills, and genuinely helping people without expecting anything in return. He developed empathy, reliability, and expertise. Over time, his reputation grew. Clients sought him out, partners approached him, and doors opened effortlessly. Jason didn't chase success anymore. It found him. He attracted it because he had become an attractive person in the truest sense, someone with value, integrity, and presence. This attraction principle works the same way in personal relationships. You don't find a meaningful connection by begging for attention or trying to be someone you're not. Instead, you become the kind of person others want to be around. You cultivate qualities like kindness, confidence, and authenticity. When you nurture your interests, passions, and emotional intelligence, you become magnetic. You don't have to convince people to care about you. They're drawn naturally. The same goes for friendships, romantic relationships, and professional connections. The more you develop yourself, the more you attract people who resonate with that growth. And in turn, those relationships open up new opportunities and enrich your life beyond what you could chase on your own. Even in skill mastery, success is about becoming attractive. Imagine a musician who wants to be famous. They could try to hack their way to virality by buying followers or chasing trends, but that rarely creates lasting success. The artists who attract real attention are those who become truly skilled, authentic, and passionate about their craft. They commit to daily practice, to deepening their understanding, to creating something meaningful. Their dedication makes them magnetic to audiences, collaborators, and industry insiders. When you become a master in your field, you no longer need to sell yourself aggressively. Your work speaks for itself, and opportunities come knocking because people want to be associated with excellence. In career advancement, the same idea applies. Instead of trying to manipulate situations or aggressively compete with colleagues, the most successful professionals focus on becoming indispensable. They develop skills that solve real problems. They build trust through reliability. They communicate clearly and listen actively. They contribute to the team's success without ego. These qualities make them attractive to managers and peers alike. They attract promotions, raises, and projects because they've built a reputation of value. Success isn't about forcing your way forward. It's about becoming someone whose presence and work naturally pull you up. This process of attraction also demands patience and consistency. Becoming an attractive person isn't an overnight project. It's a journey of steady growth. It's waking up every day and making choices that align with the person you want to be. It's the small decisions, reading a book, helping a colleague, showing up on time, practicing a skill, being honest even when it's uncomfortable, that compound into magnetic character. The truth is, success reflects who you are before it reflects what you do. If you focus solely on outcomes without nurturing your inner qualities, you might win a few battles but lose the war of lasting fulfillment and influence. But when you invest in yourself, your mindset, habits, values, and relationships, success doesn't feel like a distant goal. It feels like a natural consequence of becoming your best self.